She looked at me across the kitchen counter, her eyes warm but sharp, like she knew something I didn't. "Stay for dinner," she said, her voice casual but with an edge that made my pulse jump. I grinned, leaning in just a little, and replied, "Only if you sit beside me." The air shifted, and I swear, in that moment I had no idea how that one sentence would change everything. It was like I'd tossed a pebble into a still pond, and the ripples were already spreading. Too late to take back. Hey, before we dive into this wild story, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Are you in New York, LA, Chicago, or maybe some small town in the middle of nowhere? I'm curious to see how far this story travels. So let me know. It was the summer of 2025, and I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in communications and no clear plan for what came next. I was crashing at my buddy Jake's place in Austin, Texas, while I tried to figure out my life. Jake and I went way back, all the way to high school in Houston, where we'd spend hours in his basement playing video games or sneaking into concerts we definitely couldn't afford. We were the kind of friends who didn't need to talk every day to pick up right where we left off. His dad, Tom, had remarried a couple of years earlier, and his stepmom, Emily, was not at all what I'd pictured when Jake first told me about her. I'd imagined someone older, maybe a little stern, but Emily was different. She was in her late 30s, maybe 38 or 39, with this effortless confidence that drew your attention the second she walked into a room. It wasn't loud or showy, just this quiet certainty in the way she moved, like she knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone's approval. Her dark hair fell just past her shoulders, always a little tousled, and her green eyes had this way of locking onto you, like she could see straight through to whatever you were trying to hide. Jake's dad, Tom, was a solid guy, always quick with a smile and a handshake, but he was gone a lot for work. He had some tech sales job that kept him on the road, flying to places like San Francisco or Chicago for days at a time. That left Jake, Emily, and their golden retriever, Max, in this big modern house in a nice part of Austin. The place had floor-to-ceiling windows, a sleek kitchen with marble countertops, and a backyard pool that screamed, "We've got money, but we're not trying to rub it in your face." I'd been staying there for about a week, sleeping in their guest room with its crisp white sheets and a view of the oak trees outside. I was applying for jobs, mostly entry-level marketing gigs, and spending my days sending out resumes and refreshing my email for responses that weren't coming. Jake was working a summer internship at a tech startup downtown, so he was out of the house most of the day, leaving me and Emily to our own devices. It wasn't as weird as it sounds, at least not at first. Emily was easy to talk to, always offering me coffee or a snack, asking about my plans or what I thought about the latest Netflix show. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when she was talking to you, like your opinion actually mattered. We'd chat about random stuff, music, movies, the best taco joints in Austin, and it felt comfortable, like hanging out with a cool older cousin or something. I didn't think much of it. She was Jake's stepmom after all, and I was just a guest, trying to be polite and not overstay my welcome. That morning, I was out by the pool, sprawled on a lounge chair with my laptop, scrolling through job listings that all started to blur together. The Texas sun was brutal, even at 10 a.m., and I was sweating through my t-shirt. Emily came out with a picture of iced tea, the glass sweating in her hand. She was wearing a sundress. Nothing fancy, just a simple blue thing that hugged her in a way that made it hard to focus on my screen. "You're going to burn out staring at that thing all day," she said, setting a glass of tea in front of me. I laughed, thanked her, and we got to talking about Austin and how it had changed since she moved there a decade ago, how the traffic was getting worse, how the old dive bars were being replaced by shiny new coffee shops. It was easy, normal conversation. The kind you have with someone you're just getting to know. But then there was this moment when she leaned forward to refill my glass and her hand brushed mine. It was quick, probably accidental, but I felt this jolt like static electricity. And when I looked up, she was smiling like she knew exactly what I'd felt. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was nothing. But that moment stuck with me, replaying in my head like a song I couldn't shake. That evening, Jake was running late, stuck at the office finishing some project for his internship. I was in the living room half watching some true crime show on Netflix when Emily called out from the kitchen. "Hey Ryan, you staying for dinner?" The air was thick with the smell of roasted chicken, maybe with garlic and herbs, and it made my stomach rumble. I wandered into the kitchen, leaning against the counter, and that's when it happened. She turned from the stove, wiping her hands on a towel, and said it again, slower this time. "Stay for dinner." Her tone was light, casual, but her eyes locked onto mine. And there was this intensity, like she was saying more than the words themselves. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the way she was looking at me. Maybe it was the heat of the day still messing with my head. But I smirked and said, "Only if you sit beside me." It was meant to be a joke, something to match her vibe, but as soon as the words left my mouth, I felt the air change like I just stepped off a cliff. She didn't laugh it off or change the subject like I thought she would. Instead, she tilted her head, her lips curling into a smile that was half used, half something else. "Deal," she said. Just one word, but it hit me like a punch. My heart was pounding and I tried to play it cool, like I hadn't just said something that could have made things weird. But the way she looked at me, I knew she wasn't letting it go. "Better pick a good seat then," she added, turning back to the stove like nothing had happened. I stood there frozen, my mind racing. Had I just crossed the line? Was she playing along? The uncertainty was like a drug, thrilling and terrifying all at once. And I didn't know whether to lean into it or back away. When Jake got home, he was his usual self, oblivious, talking a mile a minute about his day, complaining about his boss, who kept changing deadlines. Dinner was ready, and we sat at their big dining table, the one with fancy placemats and candles Emily had lit for no reason other than it was Tuesday. I took a seat, not thinking too much about it. And true to her word, Emily sat right next to me. Not across, not at the head of the table, but right beside me, her arm brushing mine as she passed the salad bowl. Jake didn't notice, too busy cutting into his chicken and ranting about work. But I noticed everything. Her perfume, something light and floral, the way her fingers grazed the serving spoon, the way she'd glance at me when Jake's head was down. It wasn't obvious, not enough for Jake to pick up on, but it was enough to make my head spin. I kept asking myself, was she flirting? Was I reading too much into it? Every move she made felt like a clue, but I didn't know how to put them together. All I knew was that I'd started something with that one stupid comment, and I had no idea how to finish it. The next few days were a blur of tension and confusion. Emily didn't act any different when Jake was around. She was still the same warm, put-together stepmom asking about his day, laughing at his jokes. But when it was just the two of us, there was this undercurrent, like a secret we hadn't put into words. She'd asked me to help with something in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, or reaching something on a high shelf, and we'd end up standing a little too close, our conversations drifting from safe topics like job applications to stuff that felt more personal. One day while we were making sandwiches for lunch, she told me about how she'd wanted to be a painter when she was younger, how she'd had a whole studio in her apartment filled with canvases, but gave it up when she married Tom. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said it, like she was letting me in on a piece of herself she didn't share with everyone. I found myself opening up too, telling her about how I'd always felt like I was chasing something I couldn't quite catch. Ambition, maybe? Or just a sense of purpose. She listened, really listened in a way that made me feel seen, not like some kid crashing on her couch. One afternoon, Jake was out and Emily asked me to help her carry some boxes to the storage area in the garage. It was hot, the kind of Texas heat that makes you feel like you're breathing through a wet towel. And we were both sweating, laughing about how heavy the boxes were and how Tom always overpacked them. I set one down, and when I turned, she was closer than I expected. Her face inches from mine. Her hair was sticking to her forehead, and her cheeks were flushed from the heat. "You're stronger than you look," she said, her voice low. "Lispa." I laughed, trying to play it off, but my throat was dry and my heart was hammering. "You're not so bad yourself," I said, and she raised an eyebrow like she was daring me to say more. I didn't. I couldn't. The moment hung there, heavy like we were both waiting for the other to make a move, but neither of us did. We just went back to moving boxes, the silence between us louder than ever. That night, Jake suggested we all watch a movie to unwind. Emily picked some old rum cal from the nines, something with me, Ryan, and Tom Hanks, and we settled on the couch. Jake on one end, me in the middle, Emily on my other side. The living room was dim, lit only by the glow of the TV and a couple of lamps, and the air felt charged like a storm was coming. Halfway through the movie, Jake fell asleep, his head tipped back, snoring softly. Emily and I kept watching, but I could feel her presence next to me like a magnet pulling me closer. At one point, she shifted to get more comfortable, and her knee brushed against mine. She didn't move it. Neither did I. We sat there pretending to watch the movie, but I was barely breathing, hyper, aware of every inch between us. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what it meant, if it meant anything at all. When the credits rolled, she stood up, stretched, and said, "Good night, Ryan," in a way that felt like it carried more weight than it should have. I mumbled a good night back, my voice catching, and watched her walk upstairs, her silhouette disappearing into the dark hallway. The next morning, I woke up to a text from her. "Just a simple coffee is ready if you want some," but it felt like a lifeline, like she was pulling me back into whatever this was. I went downstairs and there she was pouring 2 mugs at the kitchen island. Jake was already gone for the day off to his internship. We sat there sipping coffee, talking about nothing and everything. New restaurants in Austin, the best hiking spots, what I thought about moving to a new city. But the whole time I was waiting for her to bring up what was happening or not happening between us, she didn't. Instead, she asked me what I wanted out of life, like really wanted. And I found myself spilling my guts, telling her about my fears of screwing up, of not being enough, of getting stuck in a life I didn't want. She listened, nodding, her eyes never leaving mine. And when I finished, she reached out and squeezed my hand. "You're going to be fine, Ryan," she said. "You're already more than enough." It was the kind of thing a friend might say, but the way she held my gaze, the way her hand lingered on mine made it feel like more. I wanted to ask her what she meant, what we were doing, but I didn't. I just sat there caught in the moment, wondering if I was making it all up in my head. By the end of the week, I was a mess. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on job applications. Every interaction with Emily felt like a tightrope race, exciting, dangerous, and impossible to turn back from. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that she was just being nice, that I was reading too much into it because I was bored or lonely or just desperate for something to feel. But then I'd catch her looking at me, or she'd say something with that playful edge, and I'd be right back to wondering what the hell was going on. It wasn't just her words or her looks. It was the way she made me feel like I was more than just Jake's friend, more than just some kid passing through. She made me feel like I could be someone, like I had something to offer. And that feeling, it was addictive. It all came to a head on my last night at Jake's place. I'd landed a job interview in Dallas, a marketing assistant gig that could be my ticket out of limbo, and I was leaving the next morning. Emily insisted on cooking a big Sindhuth dinner, steak, mashed potatoes with garlic, grilled asparagus, the works. The kitchen smelled like a restaurant, and she even set the table with cloth napkins and wine glasses, though we were just drinking sparkling water. Jake was there cracking jokes about how I'd probably trip over my own feet during the interview, oblivious as ever to the tension that had been building all week. As we sat down to eat, Emily looked at me and said, "You sure you're ready to leave us, Ryan?" It was a simple question, but the way she said it with that same intense look from that first night in the kitchen made my stomach flip. I smiled, trying to keep it light, and said, "Depends if you're saving me a seat next time." She laughed, but her eyes didn't leave mine, and for a second, it felt like Jake wasn't even in the room. After dinner, Jake got a call from his boss and stepped outside to take it, pacing around the backyard with his phone to his ear. Emily and I were cleaning up in the kitchen, me washing dishes, her drying, standing close enough that our elbows kept brushing. The silence between us was louder than ever, like a heartbeat you could feel in your chest. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned to her, the dish in my hand forgotten, and said, "What are we doing here, Emily?" My voice was quiet, but it felt like I'd shouted it. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. Instead, she set the towel down, leaned against the counter, and said, "You tell me, Ryan." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were searching, like she was waiting for me to decide what happened next. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. My heart was racing, and I could feel the weight of the moment, like whatever I said next would change everything. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head. Was this real? Was I misreading her? What about Jake, her marriage, the fact that I was leaving tomorrow? But before I could find the words, Jake walked back in, grumbling about his boss and how he had to go in early the next day. The moment shattered. Emily smiled, picked up the towel, and went back to drying dishes like nothing had happened. I stood there, my hands still in the soapy water, feeling like I'd missed my chance. The next morning, I packed my bags, my mind still spinning from the night before. Jake gave me a fist bump, told me to crush the interview, and said he'd see me when I was back in town. Emily hugged me quick but tight, her arms strong around me. As she pulled back, she whispered, "Don't be a stranger." Her breath was warm against my ear, and for a second, I didn't want to let go, but I did. I got in my car, waved goodbye, and drove away, the Austin skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror. As I headed toward Dallas, I kept replaying that night in my head, wondering what could have happened, if I'd said something different, if I'd taken the risk. I still don't know if she was flirting, if she felt the same pull I did, or if I'd built it all up in my head because I wanted it to mean something. But I do know one thing. That dinner, that moment changed how I see myself. It made me realize I'm not just some kid drifting through life, waiting for things to happen. I've got choices to make, risks to take, and maybe, just maybe, I'm braver than I thought. So, that's my story. What do you think? Was Emily just being friendly, or was there something more? Drop a comment below and let me know your take. Did I miss my shot or was I right to let it go? And if you like this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more. I've got plenty more where this came from, and I'd love to hear what you want to see next. Where are you watching from? Let's keep the conversation.